It's not going to get airtime here because...
And there's no sports fans here.
Sorry,
there's no football fans
if you want
here.
a sports channel,
we're
go
nearly 7 minutes
somewhere
into
else.
this program, and we've been talking about nothing but
You're
football.
not going to get football
This is
or
crazy.
any shape. Actually, the sphere you might get on this is a spherical object travelling at speed through the universe. That's about the only commonality.
So much of the journey that we're going on at the moment, Garvin, is the fact that we are trying to discover who we are, and as we are middle-aged men or thereabouts, or maybe slightly older than that, trying to wonder, what am I going to do in the future? Or should it be, what am I going to do now? And all the way through, we followed certain constructs, which is going to be the theme of today's, the construct. And I think when I was a youngster, I always wanted to be a filmmaker. And everybody said, get your feet back down on the ground and wise up and go and work in the boot factory, the BBC, the Bozeat Boot Company. And I said, no, I can see possibilities of what I want to be. And it always inspired me quite a lot to get into the film industry. I've just noticed that I've only got one channel, but I think it is okay. It's all right. It's just my technical head just suddenly came on because I was in another construct, which was, have I got everything recording okay? But it is. It's fine. It's perfect. I just need to not get distracted.
Now, that reminded me of when I was growing up, and the wording one channel was, we had RTE 1 on the TV. If we were looking into the UK, we had BBC 1. You're BBC again, the little acronym, but this time for the probably British Broadcasting Company, and I was in the TV field. You had the right acronym in the wrong job to start with. But beyond that, we had one channel. So when I was growing up, life, and at the same time as you were, life was a little bit simpler. We didn't think too far ahead as a kid or even a teenager. I didn't think past the weekend. I didn't think past, how am I going to get a couple of quid for my couple of tinnies and my bus fare into town, and enough to get into the entrance into the nightclub to go chasing the women. That was as far ahead as I was thinking. Actually, I was thinking in reverse. I was going, how to stay in school and college long enough to not have the responsibilities of the future, because they will come soon enough, and the time is now to sing, to dance, to chase women, to have a great time, to go to college, not to worry about mortgage, pension, bills, and more bills. They were someone else's till they became mine. I hadn't got the foresight to have any clue or inkling what I could be when I grow up. And I still haven't grown up. I still have little or no inkling or clue.
Well, when I was growing up, my dad was a gardener in the feudal system.
Don't
way back
even
in the
go
Middle
there.
Ages.
I'm not even going to let you go back. Don't go too far back. Bring it up. Bring it up a level. Yeah.
But the interesting thing was that because we moved around every 18 months, and so as a youngster, you're kind of going, right, I'll get to know all these new friends. Yeah, brilliant. Again, and then you kind of go, oh, hang on, I've now got to go somewhere else and okay, we're with some new friends and get to know them. Oh, right, now we've got to go again. And it was a constant sort of, so I was getting to meet new people all the time, new ideas, new ways of doing something. You never actually felt as though you belonged anywhere, but you got to see all kinds of possibilities of what different people were doing. Like there were doctors in one places, there were chauffeurs in other places, and there were, you name it, there all kinds of things.
I had none of that.
Different people follow different football groups.
No, you're not impressing me. I know nothing about football. I followed none of them. I'm not even going to listen to it because it means nothing to me.
The only reason I supported Manchester United because of the George Best character.
Oh,
he had the same name as me.
Blah, blah. And actually, we had somewhere before I talked about my father, and he loved football, and he was one of the people, one of them, one of the lads, and that's what they would talk about in the pub, I'm sure, and the score. It did nothing for me. I would not watch the TV. I didn't have a TV to watch. It didn't make any difference.
I know.
But I don't want to watch it. I don't want to go down to the bottom of the field.
Into that.
I don't want to be in that construct.
Yep.
That is not part of my construct. I am not a sport aficionado or lover or fan thereof. Therefore, it is just blah, blah, blah when it comes on the TV to me. It's blah, blah, blah when I'm in the pub or the restaurant and someone is talking about it. It will not hold my attention. It will not attract me in any way or form. I'd love to have the millions. I'd love to be able to kick a ball. I'd love to be a sports star. No, I wouldn't, because I didn't try. It was never going to be me. So
no, I hated football like with a passion.
Now we're talking common language. Not just a passion, a vengeance. You couldn't even get the word foot out of your mouth, and I was gone. And actually, this is the weird thing. All of my friends, none of them. None of them have that interest. None of them. Well, one might be interested in a little bit of rugby, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but not so much. They dare bring it up in conversation with the core group. The core group and the commonality was to be, when you're in college, it's about going to the pub and going to that dance and chasing those women or men, depending on who's in the group. But that was the only target or foresight that we had.
Yeah, I supported sort of, but not really, but Manchester United because it just seemed to be a name. Another guy supported Spurs, and all I can remember is that I never got into it as a youngster, but I went to college in Bournemouth, and I remember the day that Manchester United came down to play against Bournemouth, whatever there is, and it was a nightmare trying to get home because you had the sea of red coming towards you, and there was all kinds of mayhem going on. You just wanted to avoid it.
Have this conversation. I'm not going to give you the airtime. Given I spent 53 years avoiding these conversations, I would turn the TV off. I would get out of the house. I would move room. I would leave the building. I am not going to give you 30 seconds, George, to mention Manchester anything in my time. If you want to, go have a different show. It's not going to get airtime here because...
And there's no sports fans here.
Sorry,
there's no football fans
if you want a sports channel,
we're nearly 7 minutes into this program and we've been talking about nothing but
You're
football.
Not going to get football.
This is crazy.
Or any shape. Actually, the sphere you might get on this is a spherical object travelling at speed through the universe. That's about the only commonality you're going to get.
Yep.
But he's gone. He's had to go off and leaving. Now, I actually got invited to the World Cup. Ireland playing, I think it was Germany. And I went to that match for free. People could not get the tickets for love nor money. And I was there. I didn't even have a T-shirt. I didn't know who was on the team. I was looking the opposite way. I had no interest in it. So the thing is, to stop waving that ball. Don't care. So he's waving a ball in front of me here.
No, it's actually the moon.
Look.
It's actually it's a shape of a moon that I produced for because we were talking about constructs. And back in the days when I started, because this is the link from the last section, which we won't, the section that will not be mentioned again.
He might have to cut Manchester United out of the last 1.5 minutes.
Oh, no, he mentioned it again. So we should do that again. No football.
You're taking it out. Good.
Good. But here's the link. This I used to have a company called Blue Sphere, and we used to make sort of videos all over the place, or try to at least. But because the graphics weren't that good back then, and we're talking about 30 years ago, I created a moon that I stuck on a little pole. And now we can actually have a big moon in the background.
I've got a German Shepherd dog that has a ball that looks like that, and all he does is chew on it. And if this is the props we're using, I'll go out to the front garden and pick up the nearest foam ball I can find and come back in. It'll probably look like Mars. But I mean, where we're going is, we're in these constructs of I suppose the construct is your entire life, or many constructs is it could go on these alternate journeys. And at different points in the construct, we're of an age profile, and we might be thinking ahead, or we might not even be aware of our surroundings. I wasn't aware of my surroundings. I was very much in the moment. I'm very much in the moment even now. I'm in the garden, I'm in this room. I'm not thinking about down the road or out in the rest of the planet. I'm just thinking bottom of the road, cup of coffee, go for a walk in the garden, throw the ball for the dog. My construct is quite limiting in that. Now I can open up my mind and start thinking what's going on in the world, what's going on in the universe. But does it matter? Again, if I want to daydream, believe, and just be self-aware or be mindful. Well, actually, they say mindfulness is you're meant to sort of empty it all out and just be aware of where you are here. Whereas the other way, if you open up your mind, you can be anywhere in the universe. universe, anytime, anywhere, anywhen, doing anything. So the construct can be limiting or it can be all empowering.
Now, what Julia Cameron talks about in The Artist's Way, which we've mentioned quite a few times in these shows.
We better give her some mention, I think.
I know. One of the biggest problems is that the concept, the construct of what would you like to be, then you start to imagine, well, what should I be in the future? And then you end up being, I need to be a motor car racer, or I need to be an astronaut, or I need to be a supreme violinist or whatever. You're always talking about the end game, the finishing point, the point where it's all decided, not the journey in between. And quite often, most people then struggle because they're kind of going, they've set this really, really high bar that they can't seem to achieve. Whereas if they were to start looking at the small little things that give them some kind of enjoyment and pleasure that will motivate them to keep on practicing and practicing practice, they will actually eventually achieve that. I know when I started to play the piano as a kid, you kind of got bored because they kept talking about all these strange things about these black and white keys that were on the keyboard, and you couldn't make head or tail of them. And then you kind of went, if we go outside of the key of C, I'm going to get lost. Now, more recently, because I'm not trying to be a pianist, I'm not trying to be whatever it is that plays at the Albert Hall, I'm just messing around with ideas I've just learnt a whole load of chords, and I found that you can do them all the way across in any kind of key. That's just because I'm only trying to achieve a very small thing, and it's building up to bigger and bigger. I'm in the moment. I'm in the now.
You were using this little bit of language there, I think it was yesterday or the day before. We were mentioning mountains, and we were saying the we've got to climb a mountain. Because you're saying at the top of this mountain might be Mount Everest or Kilimanjaro, or it might be there's a mountain at the bottom of my road here, which I think is famous because the man who went up a hill and came down a mountain, it was that height. It's got a particular height that classifies it, if you add a couple of bricks on top, to be now a mountain. Now, we were using the language of making mountains out of molehills. Now, whereas we should be making molehills out of mountains. I'd like to think these mountains are reachable and they are attainable. These mountains are these end games. But if they're a mountain and you're not a mountaineer and you haven't got the equipment and you haven't got the plan and you haven't got those little helpers with the asses and the camels and the whatevers, you're going to go, it's unattainable. It's too far off in the distance. It's on a different it might as well be the mountain on Mars. I'm not going to get there. You're not going to get there. We want to turn the mountains into molehills, and we want to do a hop, skip, and a jump. And as I said, just end up on the top of a mountain and not even know how we got there because we took those steps. And that's where you're saying we want to turn into bite-sized chunks of smart objectives that are attainable and realistic and achievable, and they're going on the path to this mountain, but we don't notice the journey or the height or the difficulty. We just keep on achieving it by default. Now, I don't know what that is and what it looks like and what your mountain is, but George will probably have an opinion on that one.
Well, I think the key thing there is that you don't have a the end picture isn't necessarily there that is preventing you from actually achieving it. Now they do say that if you can visualize it, you can make it actually happen, which is a good thing. But if you make it too big, most people would start to go and say, do you know what? I won't bother because it's just too much of a task.
There's a weird language going. Some people, if they don't make it big enough, it's not attractive. Actually, they want to make it too big because they want to be. They're the ones that are out there going, I want to be number one in the world. I want to be the best. I want to be Conor McGregor. I want to be Mount Everest. I don't want to be the hill that you walked up and came down a mountain.
But the difficulty there is that when you do aim too high, that may be your end goal eventually. But if you want to try and go for that first, you'll probably find that you're not equipped to do that.
An awful lot of people wouldn't be.
I know, and that's the trouble. That's why a lot of people get into difficulties, both physically when they go off mountain climbing, because they have this romanticized idea of what it's going to be. Like filmmaking. Wow, we all want to be a filmmaker. That's a romantic sort of area to actually work in. Filmmaking is one of the hardest grafts that you could ever find to do. And it's sometimes the most boring activity that you're going to do. So yes, you do have a picture in your head of what you want to achieve, but quite often it's a lot of small tasks that have to be repeated and repeated. And you've been experiencing some of that because we've been writing descriptions.
Well, you've asked me the question.
It takes time.
That's the weird thing again. My measure, I think in all of our heads, we think what we're trying to attain is the output, the accolades, we're already there. You're the richest, you're the fastest, you're the quickest, you're the best, you're the star. Oh no, or you're the rock star. It doesn't matter, actor, star, like singer, dancer, doesn't matter what. You're there, you're getting enough. Some are going to do it for the love of dancing, the love of singing. Others are going to, they want to do it for the love of and have the passion. But it also leads to the accolades of you're the star. People are buying your records. They like to listen to your songs. That affirmation. And it might be millions of euro, and it might not be. It might be millions of people clapping or buying your record or getting it for free and just getting downloads and likes, but you don't get any money, but you're doing the work. So we could be doing all the work and the effort and there's no affirmation. But then you're saying, do you stop doing the work? Do you love the work, or do you just love the idea of the accolades that might come from it? Do you have the passion for it?
Yeah, that's the key, because one of the things is that in my situation, I actually love the work. I love the experimentation, the actual doing the bits and pieces and seeing, what can come out of it, because quite often there's a kind of joy and excitement about the processes that you're going through, and you do get a sense of achievement of things that you may never have done before, and you can suddenly do certain things that you never thought you had the confidence to do. The accolade sort of thing, although it could be quite nice, the idea of going into a massive great big crowd of people who are cheering, and you're waiting for 3 hours for somebody to say, right, come up on stage, and then you have to come up on stage, that's actually, unfortunately to me, not as appealing as sitting here and actually playing around with a soundtrack and getting it to do things.
Well,
that
there's
I could
a
never do
micro
before.
construct versus the macro construct. You're saying,
yeah,
we're happy to be in the room recording this or in 2 rooms, recording this half an hour conversation about potential, about possibilities, about affirmations, about dreams, about pieces of work, about mundane. It's like you mentioned, I mean, I just said we've got 10 of these that I have to go into and look at, and you have to go in and do something similar and edit, and it could be 20 hours of work just to do a little bit of English, to do a little bit of tagging, and I go, this 20 hours is 20 hours of your life. This is 20 hours of what's left of your life. Is ticking little boxes and moving pieces of paper around, is it a worthy use of this very valuable time?
One of the things that is said quite often is that if someone wanted to learn to be a filmmaker and they put off saying, let's say they wanted to go to film school, and they kind of go, nah, do you know what, you're too old and you look foolish and you look this and you put it off, and you kind of go, if I'd done it as a kid it would have been all right, I'm not going to be that kind of silly now. But the difficulty is that then becomes a block to doing something, because your expectations, you've built up this massive great big expectation. Whereas I think if we travel down this path of doing the small tasks and enjoy the moment, enjoy the creativity. For example, when we had the problem with episode 10, which will be going out, well, it went out a couple of months ago, we did a couple of weeks ago. If it wasn't for the problems and issues, I wouldn't have had the chance to do some animation and find out how to use new software. So the excitement for me was I was discovering something new, and then putting something into practice that I've built up skills over a long period of time. Actually thought I was never going to get to use them, and there I was using them on one of our little shows. So the interesting thing is that although sometimes these shows seem quite simple, possibly insignificant, we are building up some amazing skills that can be amplified at a certain point to do bigger projects, like dramas, if that's what we want to get into,
again,
or documentaries, if we want to get into.
We touched on the happy coincidences or the happy accidents. I think that was another name of another one of our shows. But it's that during if you didn't step outside the door, if I didn't step outside the door on the day, you know, my ex-girlfriend broke it off me, I would have never met my wife. If I didn't, you know, go swimming the day this house was up for sale, I would have never noticed and I would have ever bought it. There's happy coincidences. There's the day you weren't going to go out became the best day ever. I always say that to my son, because we're of a similar mindset whereby we'll come up with 20 reasons why we won't go out, and when every time we did, it was a good day. 99.9 out of 10, it was a good day. But we'll keep on thinking, it's not worth the trouble. I don't want to put my trousers on. I'm not going to get my shoes on. It's raining outside. No, get up and go. Now, in this climate and what's going on out there, that might be a different story, but sometimes it's get up and go out, maybe to the bottom of the road. You don't know who you might meet. You don't know who you might bump, what idea might spark. And that's what you were saying about the episodes. Our two most interesting episodes to date was 7 and 10, in the sense of they were both accidents. They both became something different because of sound being dropped and internet being condensed, and led us to two other possibilities, which we now will work on in the future by wrapping documentary over animation and introduce character. We don't know, but we have lots of ideas that we wouldn't have had otherwise. You know, so the construct is changing as a result of being open to happy accidents, for want of a better word.
I think the great thing is that you can have so many expectations that never get met and then you feel disappointed, or you can work in the way that we seem to be at the moment, is that we don't have any particular grand expectations, so our minds are open to all kinds of possibilities and we can start to explore them. And actually that makes us excited, because we can now suddenly tackle something we didn't think we were capable of doing before, which I think you found in what we're doing as in these little films, in these little programs, however you want to describe them. You're now building up skills using the microphone, presenting, even logging and editing. Even though you haven't touched an editing package, you're going through and putting ins and out points for me as a producer, director, for the little promos that I then just quickly package together. So we're both getting a chance to do all those things that a lot of people who are aspiring to be producers, directors, editors, cameramen, they're never going to get a chance to do this because they won't step out and go and do. They're just sitting back and kind of going, I'll wait until I get a job or see if an opportunity opens it up. We're creating opportunities for ourselves at this particular point in time.
There's an awful lot of people which I've got great respect for. I don't even know who they are, strange enough. It's just these YouTubers, these young people, these what were unknowns 5 minutes ago, and if they had followed normal convention, would have probably found it difficult in school, difficult in university, and just being another Me Too. And instead, they just went off and did it. And not only just go off and did it, they are multi-millionaire this, and they're the influencer and 50 million followers, and they're just normal kids that just went and did it. And like my own nephew there, literally in the last 6 weeks, has been offered a record contract on the back of one of his songs going viral on. Now again, he's been working for 10 years at his art, at his music, at songwriting, at producing. But with the help of TikTok, that just kicked into overdrive. It was because of the lockdown, and all of a sudden he stopped putting them on YouTube and just put it on TikTok, and 1 million likes within 6 weeks. And then before he's trying to knock the doors down of record producers and record companies, and they came to him because they saw without any effort and not knowing what you're doing, what you had was you were able to showcase your value, but what you were not the expert in is actually reaching that market. But then he did. Then if this was a taster of the market you found by accident without the skill set to find it, what is the real size of the market if you had the experts on board? So, I mean, that was brilliant for him, and it's absolutely fantastic. And we'll have a claim to fame that 3 of his first videos were actually made in this house. And I'm going to milk that to doomsday later on. But it gives me the confidence in reverse to go, look, I'm not going to be a singer-songwriter anytime soon. I'm not going to suddenly be a musician. But stop being shy. Stop saying you can't do, and stop. Somewhere out there, there's the power of the universe will just go, if not this, then that. But that will happen as a result of turning up. And what it is we just need to turn up in the construct and start building it from within, and we can, build our own little empire.
And I think the important thing there is that you're talking about a construct. The other thing that was coming to my mind was this idea of practice. We talk about practice, 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 practice. And if you do practice, you'll get better and better and more confident. And then you kind of think, well, why is it that they say that a doctor has a practice, or a solicitor has a practice, or an accountant has a practice? It's because they're doing it time and time again. They're building up their confidence. They know they can do it. Then they can come up with solutions that they never thought they could do beforehand to solve all kinds of problems.
Now, the strange thing about
practicing.
practices and law and doctor and accountant, it's the body is still the body, maths is still the maths. There's a set of rules of 1, 2, 3s and ABCs that are locked into those constructs of law, medicine, and maths, or accounting in this thing. It's business. It's money in, money out. It's based on a set of rules, and your arm is not going to suddenly be called your leg. Well, I'm sure if you lose an arm, you want to what's the word? Not draft, or what's the word now? Take your arm and put it on your leg instead. I don't know, but it's.
Amputate and reconnect,
yes,
or something.
Whatever. I can't even use my language. It is draft, is it?
Draft, it is grafting. Grafting, probably.
There you go,
grafting,
graft.
yeah.
But that's a practice. It's a practice makes perfect. The rules are till the rules change. You relearn the rule and reapply it. But then you can't apply rules to build, the future for an unknown individual. You go, I want to be famous. Apply the rules. Well, we apply the steps 1 to 10 from the top influencers on how to get 100 subscribers on your channel, and nothing happens because it doesn't work that way for everybody.
I think the problem though is that you shouldn't be trying to become famous. I think what you should be doing is trying to learn a craft, to learn.
No, George,
something.
If you want a job, you get yourself a job. I'm turning up. I want to be famous or infamous, but I don't want to just turn up and be a cog in the wheel of the machine of life.
What I'm trying to say is that if we keep thinking that this is a job, this is something we have to work at, this is something we have to do to generate an income, maybe that's the concept or the construct that we shouldn't be following. Now, in the creative side of things, where you open up to all kinds of possibilities, you're still learning techniques, you're still learning certain ways of doing something, you're still following certain types of rules, but there are different type of rules. And what they do is they open you up to doing all the things that you thought you shouldn't do because you thought, well, okay, I'm not going to generate an income out of that. But you've got practice. Then you get the opportunity later on to say, okay, I've done my dues, if you like. I've worked hard at this. I've proved that I'm capable of doing this. Now I'm going to do it. Either someone's going to pay me to do this, or I'm going to carry on doing it, but I'm going to do what I want.
No, it's a very hard question in there, because if you think of, let's stick to actors for the moment. There's so many programs out there, and let's say it's these episodical series like the EastEnders and Coronation Streets and Fair Cities in Ireland. Most of them haven't a pot to piss in. What they have is a job that they're turning up to play themselves in a role going on forever that barely pays the bills, but now has actually put them in a situation whereby they're not going to be picked for something else. They are actors, but they're barely getting paid. It's a job of an actor as opposed to did he get into the game to be an actor, or did he get into the game to just have a role in a sitcom that goes on forever and doesn't lead to this being the infamy, the fame, the actor? Not necessarily to me, you could be a great actor and not be rich. But I mean, there's a richness to your acting as opposed to playing yourself on the bottom of the street in a pub drinking a pint.
But I think one of the problems with the fame thing, and I think we're seeing that today more so than any other time, is it's very easy to become famous in some situations, but you haven't actually done anything. You've just become a face, and then eventually that face may sort of wilt, and you've got nothing else except for that face because you haven't worked on anything else.
You have the millions, you got the face and the millions, and you've fallen out of grace.
I think one of the problems is that because people think that having millions will solve all kinds of problems, it actually doesn't. It having lots and lots of money doesn't solve all problems. We talked
about this before. It gives you a new set of problems. But there's those that have. Yeah. I mean, then you start going to.
But you think about what we're doing now. We're not making lots of money out of doing what we're doing, but we have the willpower to actually carry on doing it when other people would stop. And I know that because we're doing this, we will actually we'll have a body of work that nobody else will have, and it will get to an audience eventually, and we'll start to fine-tune our capabilities of what we're doing, that we'll get better and better and better until people can go, see what they're doing?
Well, there's an element of control, which you said, we've taken in an element of control, that we are building our own construct, whereas other people that went off, that they're beholden to others. If they want a job in acting, then they have to wait for someone to say, well, I've got this story and you're male and you're 25 and you fit the profile and therefore it's not a female role, it's a male role. You have a possibility to queue up, to pitch, to be chosen, to try and be that role. But the great thing that we can do is, if we don't like this one, we'll write another one. And if we can't fit it, we're building our own roles. We're going to build our own constructs. If that one doesn't work, we'll swap, do it, and change again. But an awful lot of other people out there are in a construct of maybe their own creation that have to then wait for that role or those nature of roles, and will always be in a queue until chosen.
One of the things that we started to say at the very beginning when we started this channel was that who needs to give us permission to do this? The only person that needs to give us permission to do what we're doing is us. To say, do you know what? Other people will say, you can't do that, George, you can't do that, Garvin, wise up. And you're kind of going, well, why do I need your permission to actually do this? I can actually do this, and we're doing it, and we're putting it into practice, and we're demonstrating
and that's what an awful lot,
capabilities.
Exactly. An awful lot of people now on their own little channels of YouTube and these actors that suddenly realise, I don't have to wait. I can create roles. I can tape them myself. They might be 1 minute long. They might be comedy. They might be improv. And I'm seeing people on Facebook and that would have been on Fair City had they waited, and now they have 1 million people looking at their 30 seconds of improvised comedy around what's going on out there at the moment. And I go, you were suddenly realised that, as you said, you don't have to wait. You can now. It means your measure of what success might look like is you do have to wait if that's what your understanding of the construct is. I want a job on that sitcom. I want to have that role. I want to do that for 12 years. I want to make X amount of money, and I want to do something. I want them to give me a job as Super X-Man on Marvel 11. Whatever. If that's what you think your journey role is, then that's what it might be. But for us, we questioned before we started this, I'd like to be an actor. Well, I don't know what an actor is. Does that mean I have to go off and do King Lear? I'm going, no. If I act for 30 seconds in a role that we come up with in a situational circumstance, and we can put it out there, you're going, now we're acting. Now we're interviewing, we're presenting, and we could even act. Now, it may not be a great show to watch, but I mean, it doesn't stop you being able to do, change, influence, grow, and try.
Well, you think about what we've been doing so far. We started off with one situation. I had a white sheet behind me that we were lighting. And then you were kind of going, well, I've got these paintings. So you put these paintings behind you. And I went, oh, okay. And you said, well, why don't you put a green screen? So we now have a green screen behind us. And I could put the paintings behind me as well. And we can alternate. Now we've both got green screens that kind of going, we can go beyond the painting into infinity. And we can do all kinds of things. This background now can be anything that we want to, but just those little iterations, just those little changes are actually sparking our imagination to get us to do anything we want to be able to do within the confines of this little
and that's
rectangle.
Well, the confines of your imagination. I don't know why. I was watching a program the other night, and like a nice little film, and it was about this girl that wanted to be immortalized on the golden record in space, and was shot off into space on like NASA, the voice of the children on the planet, and it was Camp Zero or something like that. But what I learned from that one little sentence was zero is the number of infinity. Instead of it being nothing, it was actually everything. So we can think of nothing, or you can think of anything. Everything is possible. You can think of everything, but obviously you need about that amount of time. So you are your own set of parameters and limit. It's limitless. Enjoy it. Don't get stuck in a construct. Build your construct from within. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell for notifications.